Why can't we just get along? Today, we will help you foster a culture of respect between personal identity and conflicting beliefs. Welcome to the Employer's Corner podcast, a casual conversation about how to navigate the daily challenges in today's workplace. My name is Chelsea Jensen, and today I'm here with my colleague, Diana Sadighi. Diana works and trains and consults here at Employers Council with member organizations on HR operations, metrics, and workforce planning. She has more than 30 years of HR leadership experience in manufacturing, renewable energy, and consulting. She's been a local, state, and regional volunteer with SHRM and has served on the board of directors for Community Shares of Colorado. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So people might be wondering from our teaser, what exactly are we talking about today? And I would love it if you could share, what we're going to be talking about, why this is important, and also why should organizations care about this?
Sure. I think it's in an organization's best interest to have their employees feel included and part of the organization so they can really focus on being as productive as possible for the organization. And then on a micro level, it's just a waste of time when you have to deal with mediating employee disputes or people feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. You're just not focused on what's important for your organization.
Great. So really kind of focusing in on workplace respect today. And how do we reduce the time that, people are maybe having some disputes and save time at our organization and really create a culture around this? So such a good topic.
Yeah, and I think today attracting and retaining our employees is really important, and trying to make sure that they feel comfortable in the workplace. We spend a lot of time on employee branding and creating a culture, and then small things can really derail that experience for an employee.
So some of our listeners out there may find the topic that we're covering today a bit daunting. So to help build some confidence, what are some of the skills that HR or managers or leaders at our organization currently have to help us deal with unknown situations?
Yeah, we've learned throughout our careers to build certain skills, adaptability to changing situations, which we've all really seen this last year, resilience to bounce back from unknown, staying curious about new things that may be impacting us in the workplace. I mean, I think back over my career and all the times I was stunned to have to deal with, what, marijuana's legal in the workplace after all these years of drug testing? And now it's common. We know how to deal with it. So relying on those experiences where we faced new things or different forms of identity in the past, and we've been able to move through it successfully, I think is important.
Yeah, so we've definitely had to deal with a lot of unknown situations, especially as HR professionals over this past year, navigating COVID and the way our workplace is changing so much. So what are some of the identity issues that you currently see or maybe you hear from our members?
Yeah, we hear about a lot of conflicts, and one of them sounds so simple, but just call me by my name. And, I heard a story recently about an employee who had whose manager had difficulty pronouncing their name. And so they just wanted to rename that person. Oftentimes, if we're thinking of ourselves as a manager, we're trying to be efficient and productive. And I'm just going to call you Joe because I can't remember Juan. That's so disrespectful. And how would you feel if I called you Mary instead of Chelsea?
It's funny. That's my mom's name.
Even worse.
Yes.
And so that might be an issue, or mispronouncing somebody's name. As you introduced me, I love the way you remember to pronounce my name.
Yes, because I was, for those of you listening, I was Diana's mentor when she came on board here at Employers Council, and I was like, I got to figure out how to properly pronounce her name because that is a sign of respect.
Right, and when we meet somebody for the first time, saying, can you pronounce your name for me or help me with that, is just a small step that means a lot in terms of making somebody feel important and wanted and welcome in the workplace.
Yes, and remembering people's names too. I used to, at a previous organization, I had a CEO that we had a very large company, and I happened to in HR work on the same floor that he did. And he would actually always walk by my desk and always say, "Hi, Chelsea." Even though we had thousands and thousands of employees there, but he always remembered my name, and it means a lot. It's a huge sign of respect, and it means a lot when you know somebody's name.
And it really sets off your work relationship on the right foot. And it's not just at work, right? These are skills that we've learned in our everyday life, or as they say back in kindergarten. My husband is David, and he introduces himself as David, and a lot of people immediately say, "Hi, Dave," and he accepts it, but does he feel as warm towards that person as he does to someone who says David and uses his full name? And I know you have the same issue. Your husband goes by Drew, not Andrew, and it just seems like it could be a minor thing. What's the big deal? But over time, those resentments sort of build up.
Yes. And what are some of the other items that you see in addition to the names?
Well, I think in recent years, we've seen some questions from our members about using personal pronouns. And there's a lot of opinions around that, and many organizations are in different places. I think we first noticed it when we saw it in email signatures. Now that we're online, you can see that when you log in, it'll say Diana, and they'll say something like she, her after that, or they and them. And so many people are uncomfortable with that because it's something new. But we've dealt with these kinds of new things so many times, and just like anything else new, it's going to be a little awkward at the beginning. Think about how we've evolved in our language from referring to races in different ways, whether it's white or Caucasian or Black or African American. I recently had a member question whether it's Native American, American Indian, or Indigenous. And the answer is you ask the person. And it's the same thing with pronouns. It feels a little awkward to say, "Hi, my name is Diana. I use she, her." But the more you use it, the more it starts to flow. And it's not that different from years ago when we used to introduce ourselves as Miss or Mrs. or Ms. Remember when that first came out, it was so awkward. Which one do you use? It's a non-issue today. So we've evolved and learned how to use those kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that our language is really a living thing, and it can absolutely change over time.
And I've heard that complaint from people that say it's grammatically incorrect to use they, them, or, well, then I don't know what gender they are. And, with the exception of very few documents on an HR level, do you really need to know someone's gender? Or are you just, nosy? Do you need to know, or do you want to know? And so I think over time, you'll get more comfortable with using that kind of language. But in an everyday conversation, there are ways, if you're uncomfortable with using they or them, that you can say the employee instead of she. Or you can say you instead of him.
Or just use their name.
Use their name,
That's
correct.
Right. Yeah.
But the use of they as a singular pronoun for all your grammar geeks out there actually goes back hundreds of years. There's examples of it going back to Shakespeare's time. And today in modern times, there's many organizations that have now accepted the use of they as a singular pronoun, from newspapers to magazines to even the Oxford Dictionary, which is often thought of as the holy grail of proper grammar. And just like other forms of language, it's a living thing, so it changes over time. But more importantly, it's not about what is right. Is it grammatically correct? But about showing respect for the other person. Don't I own my identity, so I get to say what I'm being called. It's like going to school the first day and somebody saying, "We have too many Chelseas, so I'm going to call you Carol from now on." It's sort of almost a slap in the face. And just because the teacher couldn't remember your name or there were too many Chelseas in the class, does that give them the right to sort of rename you? You get to call yourself by your own name and by your own pronouns.
Yes, and you alluded to it a little bit there in your sharing. Can you circle back to a little bit more about gender? And I know that's a topic that we hear a lot from our members too, and that being one of our identity issues too.
Sure. It's one of the new things we're dealing in the workplace today is the concept of a non-binary gender. And whether your personal beliefs conflict with that or not, there's many organizations, including government agencies, that are now recognizing that there could be a difference between just male or female. In Colorado, it can be X or intersex. Now shows up on documents like driver's license and birth certificates. So it is a new thing, but it is being accepted. And it feels daunting, right? It's a new thing. There's a whole glossary of different types of terms for gender non-binary people. And I encourage you, if you're curious about that, to look at resources like the Human Rights Campaign or My Personal Pronouns are two websites that can educate you on that. But it's really just about responding to what the employee is asking you to call them. You don't really need to know more than that. You don't have to think about and determine for yourself the right answer. You can just say, Chelsea, what pronouns do you use? And again, it's an area where maybe my personal beliefs may conflict with that. I'm not asking anyone to change their personal beliefs. I'm just asking them to show respect to each other in the workplace so that we can all just get along and get our work done and form productive relationships instead of arguing back and forth on these issues.
Yes, and I had, in the same vein, a question from a member. This was a few years ago, where they stated that the person that they interviewed in the interview and how they presented themselves was dressed, more masculine, and when they showed up to work, they were dressed more feminine, and they said they were almost to the point of being unrecognizable when they came in for their first day. So, what advice would you give to an employer that maybe has a situation like that?
First of all, we always go back to, does it matter for work? Does it matter in the way that they have to do their job? And in some cases, it may, in terms of dress codes, and we can talk about that. But when somebody shows up the first day, think about other situations. You've certainly hired someone and they show up the first day of work with a different name. Well, maybe they got married or divorced, or they legally changed their name. Or you were introduced to them as Andrew and they go by Drew, or George goes by Buddy. So there are those changes. And is it important to know the reason behind the change? Or is it important to just identify that person and just call them by their name or use the pronouns that they want to be used so that they feel part of your organization? And I think it's important for us as leaders and HR people to realize that we can be allies for that. The way we make our workplaces feel more inclusive is not just by modeling the right behavior for ourselves, but calling it out where we see it. Sometimes it's embarrassing. My last name often gets mispronounced, and I have to keep reminding people or say it over or give them some clues on how to pronounce it. But I love it when somebody else says, oh, it's Sadighi. Here's how I remember it. I picture a man digging. I've had somebody say that. And so that's being helpful to others and spreading that throughout your organization.
Yes. I think that's so important. And you just recently shared with us that you want to be called Di versus Diana too. So now we need to do that as well.
It's interesting. After 4 years of working here at Employers Council, we were talking about names, and I said something about Di, and they said, oh, we can call you that? I'm known professionally as Diana, and somehow I just never got around to saying, well, my friends all call me Di. So yes, you can call me Di.
And kind of in the same vein too here, a lot of questions we get from our members are, what is the appropriate the bathroom situation. It's like the bathroom question that always comes up, or even locker rooms. Can you shed some light on that for us on that one?
Yeah, I think it's important not to categorize this as a gender issue. So when you go into the bathroom, what are you there for? You're there to use the facilities. I don't know about you, but that's usually the only thing on my mind when I walk in. I'm not looking around to see who else is in there and what gender they are. I just want to go in and have my private time. And many people have a continuum sort of on privacy issues. There's certainly people that don't make eye contact with anyone when they walk into the bathroom, and other people that want to have a conversation unseen with the other person. And that's a comfort level as well. So are you manufacturing an issue where one perhaps doesn't exist? And when you walk into the bathroom, is somebody wearing a sign that says, I don't belong here, or here's my gender? No, that's really not what it's about.
Yes, and I forgot to ask you a question too. So I'm jumping back a little bit here to the appearance piece, and I want to talk a little bit about dress code because we also get this question quite a bit too. So how does dress code play into, what someone's wearing and how they show up for work? How does an employer kind of navigate that piece?
Oftentimes dress codes can be a source of conflict in an organization. And our recommendation is to keep it as general as possible. So let's not make a whole list of what's acceptable and not, shorts and skirts and all that little detail. Stick to a more general, like professional business attire. But then employees often have a question, what does professional mean? So lay out neat and clean clothing or legs covered for safety reasons. But oftentimes, I think you have to examine where the discomfort comes from. Is it your own unconscious bias in terms of not liking yoga pants at work, for example? Or is it that you don't like 6 piercings in one ear? Does that really impact the work that an individual is doing? And I think it's one of the benefits of our more remote workplaces is we've really de-emphasized what people wear to work. I saw a question from one of our members the other day is, can I ask people to show up more professionally for internal Zoom meetings? And I said, why does that matter? And certainly you have an opinion, which I respect, that you think I should wear a collared shirt whenever I appear on camera. But does that really impact the work that needs to be done? Is that what we should be focusing on? Our identity issues and that I prefer to wear a sweatshirt when I'm at work, does that impact the quality of the article I may be writing for you or the code that I'm writing?
Yes, absolutely. It has, no impact on the work product that we're putting out. And I'm always writing my articles in my sweatpants. So now Valerie, our boss, knows that. So
right.
But I think she's fine with it. So I want to talk a little bit about, because I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking about this. Obviously, we're not attorneys, and kind of like the legal protections that are out there and that employers, should be aware of. Balancing.
That's a good point. We're here to talk about respect, but there are legal issues involved. And sometimes they conflict. I may have certain religious beliefs. I may have a different sexual orientation. We've learned as HR professionals and as managers how to not count those protected classes. And it's important to know that based on certain recent Supreme Court hearings that sexual orientation and gender identity are protected classes. The conflict about why we can't get along often shows up when one person's beliefs conflict with another. And I think it's a balancing act, right? We have to recognize people's rights, and it's likely that every one of us is in a protected class. So it's not a new matter of what my gender or sexual identity is against my religious belief. It's a matter of respecting those differences. I mean, I think back to when I started my career, it was not uncommon for people to think that women maybe didn't belong at work, or that a woman shouldn't be in a leadership role. I mean, think how far we've come and still have further to go in terms of that regard. And it's the same thing today. There may be new categories. We've evolved with having disabled and differently abled people in the workforce. We've evolved to having different gender identities in the workforce. And it's important to not rank those. And it's important not to disrespect those beliefs. If someone holds on to a belief that their religion says that women should be subservient to men, I'm not going to change their mind. But I can set expectations for what's professional conduct in the workplace and what's acceptable in the workplace that complies with legislation.
Yeah, it's such an important piece to recognize the legal factors, and also, yes, that sometimes people's religious beliefs can come up in all of this too. And for our listeners out there who are really trying to cultivate a more meaningful culture of inclusion for all employees throughout their organization, what are some steps they can take? What are some things that they can consider in trying to do this?
I think the staying curious and not veering into the nosy piece. So if there is something new that strikes you at work, reach out to your manager or to your human resources. And in some cases, you can ask an individual. I often get asked, what's the nationality of your last name? Again, is it coming from a place of wanting to learn more about that so that I can recognize it and see more about learning about you as a person? Or am I coming at it from I don't understand that name and I can't pronounce it? And we can usually tell the difference. So curiosity about someone's background or interest area is fine. Using that as something that doesn't resonate with me is not fine. And so making everyone feel like they belong, I think a lot of it comes down to personal relationships. When I enjoy working with you, when you ask me to do something outside my comfort zone, like appearing on a podcast, I'm going to do it because we have a relationship that is built up over time. We like each other. We respect each other. And so that helps me and helps you accomplish your goals at work. And so even where our beliefs, maybe our political beliefs are different, that doesn't affect how I feel about you as a coworker.
Yes, and I do appreciate you joining us for this podcast today very much. So, and I, of course, love working with you as well. So final thoughts for our listeners as we kind of head to the end. Anything else that you'd, want to share with them related to this topic?
I think we've talked about a lot of topics like different names, gender, bathroom issues, ethnic background. Why can't we just get along by going back to the fundamental things we learned in kindergarten, that you're going to meet different people, that they're going to have different beliefs, that I'm not going to convert you or change your mind about that, but I want to get to know you a little bit better, and because of that, we're going to get along, to eliminate distractions at the workplace, to eliminate problems with productivity, to form a more inclusive workplace. And it's not just about toleration, it's going beyond that to welcoming. There's a lot of talk about microaggressions and how we subconsciously or not so subconsciously insult each other. There's a concept of microaffirmation, which is making somebody feel welcome. And that might be, wow, that's a great name. Help me learn that a little bit better. What tips do you have that shows that I care about you as an individual and what your name is? That makes you feel more welcome and makes our relationship better at work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diana, for joining us on this podcast today. This was great, and I know we gave a lot of helpful information to our listeners, so thank you. Thank you all for joining this episode of today's Employers Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, rate, and comment. If you'd like more information on today's topic, please visit us at employerscouncil.org.